pride, passion, and pageantry of college football lives here. This is the Paul Finebaum Show, Hour 3 podcast.
This might be college football heaven.
Back, second half of the show. It's been a busy one, a lot of conversation about the big meeting in New Orleans. We've been down there. We've gotten reaction. We'll get more. We'll talk about another legal issue that could involve whether high school athletes in Alabama and Georgia are able to avoid paying income tax. How would you like that if you're a citizen of those two states? You pay, but your favorite athlete does not. We'll have a legal analysis of that coming up here in just a minute. Let's continue right now. And Davis is up next. Hello, Davis.
Hello, Paul.
Hey, good afternoon.
I'm a long time listener.
Well, thank you.
First time caller.
That is great to hear.
I'll tell you how far back. You remember back when Cam Newton signed with Auburn and his family got that money and all?
Oh, I most certainly do remember that.
And, well, you made the statement that he didn't get anything. It was his family.
Right.
Well, if you'll remember, several years before that, Alabama almost got the death penalty when the kid from Tennessee, Green, was investigated.
Yeah, Albert
and
Means.
It wasn't even his family. It was his coach that got that money.
You're right. That was Albert Means in Memphis.
Right. And I just, I couldn't understand why you thought.
Well, what I was doing was I was being specific. Cam never profited directly, but do I think now, Davis, that there wasn't money washed in his father's church? Of course I do. I mean, I'm a grown-up. So sometimes you say something in the heat of the moment because you're leaning heavily on what your available information is or was, and then you find out later how silly you were to believe the people that told you that. It's happened a few times in my life.
Listen,
it happens once, but it never happens twice.
I don't even think. It sounds good.
Well, thank you. It's good to talk to you again, Davis.
All right. Maybe another time.
Okay. Well, the story he's talking about happened in 2010. What year is it? 2025. It took him 15 years to try to settle that score with me. Man, that was rough. Mike in Akron, Ohio. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Paul. I'm a big fan.
Matter
of fact, I was hoping maybe the Finebaum show could go through a transfer portal to get to the Big Ten. But
hey, Mike,
really
you never know. You might get your wish. We're up for bid.
I'll look forward to that. I was wondering what your opinion would be if there could be something similar to the NIT, but for college football, for all these teams that are let out. I can wait
you know what,
answer.
Mike, we do have the NIT in college football. It's all those before Christmas bowl games.
Well, something a little more organized. Would that make sense?
Well, here's what
I do love the bowl games.
Yeah, I mean, if we end up if Big 12, ACC, Pac-12, some of the smaller conferences decide they don't like what's happening with the SEC and the Big Ten, then that very well could happen. And would it be great? No, but it would be certainly probably more entertaining than the NIT, which, I mean, the NIT serves a purpose. And what is it? It gives schools something to do. The games are on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Their games they're on nights that the NCAA tournament isn't on. And if I'm sitting at home or if you're in a sports bar or restaurant and the game's on, are you going to watch it? Yes. Will you care as much?
The only time I've ever
No.
watched the NIT was when my team was in it.
Yeah,
I didn't make it to the big dance.
I can assure you, back in the day when I was a sports writer, I covered a lot of NIT games, and some of them were fairly important, but they aren't important anymore because you have to at least remember who won the NIT. And I don't remember. I never remember from year to year. Even though I remember interviewing, I think it was Buzz Williams a couple of years ago, playing for the NIT championship. I think other teams. It's good for the team to play 5 or 6 more games, but from a fan standpoint, it is fairly irrelevant. Just like I think what you have proposed would be.
All right. Well, I appreciate your answer. And, finally, my gut tells me Kansas City barbecue is the best. Anything that has sauce is something that I like.
I'm glad to hear that, Mike.
Thank you very much.
And it would be good for Kansas City to get a win after what happened in the Super Bowl. Gary is up next in Kentucky. Hey, Gary.
Hey, how you doing, Paul?
We are doing great. Thank you.
Like your show, watch you a lot. First-time caller.
You bet.
But UK, what do you think about UK basketball?
I like what I see. I think the schedule is just fairly overwhelming, though.
Yeah, they're good. They beat Duke, they beat Gonzaga, and then they will lose to teams that they should actually dominate. You know. That's what I don't understand.
Yeah, but listen, it's a transitional year. I mean, they have had some mammoth wins so far, but it just feels like the schedule is beginning to wear them down.
Yeah, well, they got the injuries also.
Well, that's what happens. But
yes,
regardless of how it ends up, I still like Mark Pope. I think he's done a good job this year. I hope they can get past the first round. I think that would be a major improvement.
Yes, it would be a major improvement. It really would. But it's the losses that they've had. I don't understand how they can play so good one night and be off the next.
Gary, I'll try to explain it. You're talking about, and you've heard this before, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old players who are not the same one night from the next. I mean, I watched the Alabama game the other day against Auburn. I didn't recognize Mark Sears. I didn't recognize Nelson.
Yes.
And, sometimes it's the pressure of the moment. And I think sometimes it can be a little too, it shouldn't be too big when you've played in the Final Four. But I think for Kentucky, it's still a process. It's an evolution. I just hope they can make a run down the stretch because that really would turn this into a big success. I mean, the Arkansas game was, I think, one of those moments that it just seemed a little too big for them. And in the end, listen, it doesn't really matter. I mean, that's just a game that the media made a big deal about. Hey, thank you very much for the call. Appreciate it. Let's move along and talk to Daryl, who is in Texas. Hey, Daryl.
Hey, how you doing?
We are doing great.
Nice to get through. I had a question about the athletes who get this NIL money, and regardless of the state you're in. But what states we're talking about that are trying to push for the change for more. I guess they see it as more equity for them. But it's going to be hard to explain that to a young man working at the grocery store. They're holding taxes out on him, and some of these athletes might make college athletes now might make $1 million. So it's kind of hard to square all that.
Well said, Daryl. Hey, thank you very, very much. Really great to hear from you. We'll take a short break, and we are coming right back.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Let's check in with John, who is calling from Missouri. Hey, John.
Hello, Paul. Good afternoon. This is
hello.
John from
Good afternoon to
St.
you.
Louis.
Thank you.
Paul, I was listening to some Beatles music this afternoon, and I was going to ask you, what was your favorite Beatles album?
Let's think about this for a second, Randy. Where would you go? You're more of a Beatles official. Randy likes the White Album.
Well, the White Album was pretty darn good, Paul.
It was.
And
I like Meet the Beatles.
Yeah, Meet the Beatles is good.
Beatles.
But anyway,
it's really I mean, it kind of seems bubblegumish, but there's some pretty good songs on there.
Well, I'm not sure there was a bad Beatles album, Paul. But I can tell you one thing I do know.
What's that?
There was a really good song on the White Album on side 4.
Okay.
And it was called Cry Baby Cry.
Yeah.
And sometimes, Paul, I think your show is a little bit about Cry Baby Cry.
So we make your mother sigh? Is that right?
And you're old enough to know better. But Cry Baby Cry. And you know why that is, Paul?
I really don't, John, but I'm all ears.
Well, I think you know why, Paul, but you never really talk about things. So I'm just gonna tell you right now that your show has this agenda, and we're not going to talk about the agenda, but I want to talk about a couple other things tonight. And the first things first is 3 of your callers yesterday made some very derogatory, negative comments about me, and that's okay. That's what this country is all about. But I can tell you one thing, and specifically related to Mr. Legend. Mm-hmm. I don't think, Legend, you have any inkling or any perception about what's right and wrong. So before you start making negative comments about people, look at yourself in the mirror, Legend. And with that said, Paul, the last comment I'm going to make about things is I brought this up yesterday, and I'm hoping SEC Nation stands tall on Thursday night and supports our team for the United States.
John, you've mentioned this 3 or 4 times. So
I know, Paul, but you need to listen to this because
no, I don't.
You don't listen. Paul.
I mean, I don't mind you mentioning it, but the 3rd time and asking the SEC Nation to get fired up about a hockey game in Boston.
It is very important, Paul, for this country.
No,
and you
it's
obviously
really not.
Don't like this country. And by the way, Paul, goodbye.
I don't think there's any evidence that I don't like this country. What I don't like is the same call 3 straight times. I am cheering for the U.S. to beat Canada. Not quite the same as beating Russia in 1980. But it's not like we're at war with Canada yet. But I think you're repeating the same thing over and over again to a mostly SEC audience. Feels pretty lame. Yeah. That's right. Just an opinion. Dave is in Indiana. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Paul. This first-time caller, Bama fan for life, Johnny Musso was my favorite of all time. Just a fantastic. But let's get excited about Ty Simpson. I'm not for sure if you realize that he's got a younger brother, Graham Simpson, in Tennessee. That's as good as, if not better. They threw for 600 yards in a regional game.
What year is he?
He's a sophomore, I'm thinking.
Okay.
I got a friend of mine that's from his hometown.
Right.
And he's on my football crew. I referee football here in Indiana.
Okay.
And plus you've got a wide receiver. Oh, I just added Asa Barnes, who is a wide receiver that's committed to Alabama.
Okay.
That was Graham Simpson's wide receiver that he had thrown to this season.
Hey, Dave, how long have you been an official?
32 years.
Wow.
And I've done state championships here in Indiana, and pretty well seen it all.
Hey, I'm curious, Dave. Why it's gotten to become a cottage industry to hate the officiating? Do you have any idea why?
Nah. Well,
I have a friend who thinks every call against his team is a national tragedy.
Well, I had a coach this year, no kidding, he's from Indiana here, that he didn't like a call that was made by my back judge. We still use a 5-man crew in Indiana.
Okay.
And it was a 40-yard pass play with 12 seconds to go in the first half. They were getting beat by 20 to 7, and it was a bomb. The ball was caught. High school rules, you don't have to have a football play, but you just go up, make the catch, come down with the football, and it's a good catch. Well, he comes out calls timeout, comes out on the field, and starts firing F-bombs at me.
Ooh.
As the white hat, and then he looks at my crew and then chooses to tell me how he effing hates my crew.
Oh, my goodness.
And, yeah, I mean, and I've talked to the commissioner of Indiana about this, and I said, we've got a problem. You know, if you got a coach, and I didn't throw him out because they have a 2-game mandatory rule and it was already week 7 where he would miss his, and I used to coach also before I refereed, so I've got kind of a bleeding heart for coaches in some cases. Right. In fact, I did in this case. You know, and it was very upsetting. And actually it was from my home high school here in Evansville, Indiana. There were 3 guys on my crew that actually went to this high school, and they just got beat by a better team. So, but I just wanted to bring up, you know, I've been a Bama fan all my life. I got a friend that lives in Hoover that's been trying to get me down there to a game, and I've been to Tuscaloosa, but I walked all around and stuff, but never been a game yet, but I plan to. But I just think good days are ahead with give Ty Simpson a chance because he's a stud.
Well,
So,
I will
thank you very
certainly take your word for it. Hey, thank you very much, Dave. That was interesting. Let's check in with Steve next. Hello, Steve. Go right ahead.
Hey, Paul. Great show.
Hey, Steve.
I just you said earlier you talked about the guy responsible for getting Bruce Pearl to Auburn, and you got the wrong Jay. It was Jay Gouge, who was then president at Auburn, who gave the order. Or gave the order to his staff to go get Bruce Pearl.
Well, so, Jay Gouge has done a lot of great things for Auburn in his several tenures as the president. I appreciate you correcting that.
I wish we could get him one more. War Eagle.
War Eagle. Sounds like the police are ready to take him away, too. Bob is also in Indiana. Hey, Bob. Tennessee. I'm sorry. Go right ahead, Bob.
That's all right, Paul. Listen, we're honored to be on and talk to you.
Thank you.
My wife listens every day and loves your show.
Well, thank you.
We have 2 questions for you. One is, what spy novel are you reading right now?
Ooh, I think I'm trying to remember what I'm reading. I think I just finished a Daniel Silva book. Do you read him?
Yes.
He's one of my favorites. I mean, obviously, I'm always looking for a new one, though. You have any suggestions?
Well, I'm more of reading about World War II generals. I just read one of Eisenhower's autobiographies.
Oh, wow. So by the way, I'm really I have not read that much on Eisenhower, but I'm certainly intrigued by his story.
Yeah.
Who is the author?
That one was actually an autobiography that he wrote with someone else.
Oh, okay,
so.
okay. I don't think I read.
Yeah,
I do.
Really
I did read. I went back and did this a couple of months ago. I read "Eye of the Needle," which is about the Normandy invasion. It was pretty amazing. It's a very old book, but I had not read it in a long time.
And she wanted to know about Rocco. What's your favorite Rocco moment? And how did he end up sticking with you guys when he couldn't stick with 5 other families?
Yeah, my wife was very insulted when I did an interview a couple of months ago with Garden and Gun, and I described my dog as a 5-time loser. I think patience. The problem with this dog is he sheds. So I mean, the most important thing in our house is a vacuum cleaner. Because this dog, but I mean, this sounds like every dog owner. He's probably the sweetest dog, most lovable dog I've ever met. And I say that because the previous dog we had was the smartest dog I've ever met, but he would take your arm off, given the opportunity. He would, and by the way, he wouldn't even blink an eye about it. He would mostly take your ankle off.
Well, we love your show. Not every caller's like John. We really enjoy the dialogue and the perspective you bring. And
well, thank you.
Thanks for what you mean to sports, and good luck to you.
Bob, thanks a lot. And I was going to bring the dog in, but there's so much of that dog bringing in with sports figures these days. I thought, would you sanction putting the dog in the chair? We'll do it before I leave. We'll take a short break.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
You've heard us talk about this a couple of different times. Nick Saban apparently originally gave an idea to the Georgia State Legislature. Now Alabama's back in the game. So what are they really trying to do? And is it going to work, I think, is the question. We decided to bring Michael McCann on, who excels at dissecting and analyzing sports and legal questions. Michael, great to have you on. Thank you very, very much. Let's start with an overview of all this, and then we're all pretty curious about your legal opinion. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Paul. Thanks for having me. So both Georgia and Alabama legislators have introduced legislation that would exempt college athletes from paying state income taxes on NIL money. And that would mean in Georgia, the athletes avoid paying the 5.39% income tax. And in Alabama, it ranges from 2% to 5%, the state income tax, depending upon income level. And, of course, that would make maybe those schools in those states more attractive to recruits if they can avoid paying an income tax. Whether that's a good idea and whether it's legal are other considerations.
So everyone wants to help out their home state, especially keeping athletes home. It sounds great, except for the fact that the rest of us poor schmoes do pay income tax. So let's get into whether it's even possible. Let's say these things pass, which they probably will. Are they legal?
Well, I think they're going to run into some issues in terms of equal protection of the law. And as you said, Paul, you and me, we pay taxes. And a group more analogous to college athletes would be other college students, including those that are making money through influencing on social media or making money as actors or musicians or esports players. They're all generating income and they don't get the tax break. So what they could do is argue that that type of law would violate equal protection of the law, which very basically, under the Constitution, the law has to treat us equally as citizens. And if the law treats one group better than others, it presents the possibility of litigation. And it's very possible that another college student or a random person, but I think the best group would be another college student who's making money would argue that this violates the Constitution. We have seen some cases over the years, including a Supreme Court case out of New Mexico, where the state passed a law giving a tax break to Vietnam War veterans, but only if they moved to the state by a certain date. And folks who moved thereafter weren't allowed to get that tax break. Well, those that did said, that's really unfair. We served our country. We did all the things that this law is about. Why are you excluding us? And the other thing, Paul, with an NIL exemption is, what is it for? I mean, NIL is supposed to be about the use of an athlete's right of publicity for endorsement deals. It's not supposed to be pay for play. So if this is an inducement to get an athlete to go to a school in Georgia or Alabama, that could be problematic as well.
Let me ask you to go back, and obviously this would be quite an important case. It's not easy to predict the Supreme Court, but first of all, they'd have to agree to hear the case after it goes through the system. But based on what you know about the Constitution and the amendment, what likely would the argument be to defend this state law?
Yeah, I imagine they would say that equal protection claims are often difficult, that they usually come up short, that the state doesn't have to establish a super persuasive reason for this type of law, that they are treating college athletes' life as expensive, that they want to give them a chance to make more money that they could use to further their education. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons that could be offered up. I think the tricky part is if NIL is supposed to be about compensating someone for the use of their identity, which is really what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be pay-for-play, right? In fact, the NCAA doesn't allow pay-for-play. And in some of these state NIL statutes prohibit pay-for-play. So setting aside NCAA rules, there are state laws that are against that. So if the defenders of this type of legislation say, well, look, we're competing with schools in Texas, Tennessee, Florida, they have no state income tax, we're going to lose athletes to those states, that's not a great argument, because that, to me, would sound like pay-for-play. The purpose of this is to induce an athlete to go play in Alabama or play in Georgia instead of going to Texas, Tennessee, Florida, or other states where there is either no income tax or a lower one.
Michael McCann with this. Michael, a couple of other fronts. In terms of the House settlement, which I think we're finally getting close to at least some resolution, what can you add to this waiting game? Because everybody in college athletics is waiting to get the final ruling.
Yeah, so they're going to have to wait a little longer. They're going to have to wait till April 7th is when Judge Wilkins is going to hold a hearing to hear objections, it's a fairness hearing where she will hear from athletes who have opted out and want to go tell her why they have opted out. And they can express their problems with it, whether it's the roster caps, whether it's the argument that the athletes should make more money through compensation, that this salary cap model, they're not calling it a salary cap, but that's basically what it is, that schools can pay up to $21 million, that's too low, that it should be bargained with the players union. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons that she's going to hear, and she will listen. She will absolutely listen. She's a very attentive judge. We know that she had concerns before she preliminary approved the settlement last fall, where she said, I don't want to restrain the NIL market. And the NCAA and lawyers for the players had to go tweak the language. She could do the same here. But I would say, if we're sort of looking at what's the most likely outcome, the most likely outcome is that whether immediately or after some time she approves the settlement, because the standard for approval is not that high. It's really a reasonable, fair agreement. And my suspicion is that she's inclined to approve it, that she would really have to be dissuaded from doing that. And I don't know if I've heard enough. Certainly I've heard it's unfair to some athletes, and it probably is. And maybe there could be a better deal, but that's not the test isn't sort of the perfect. It's whether it's pretty good.
Michael, finally, Congress. We've talked about this forever. Different makeup, different attitude. But as you look at what's going on in Washington, and there's a great deal. Where do you think Congress is in terms of moving toward some sort of legislation toward NIL?
Yeah, I think certainly for the NCAA, this is their moment to strike. There's of course, President Trump would be inclined to resolve some of the issues that the NCAA has expressed. We also know with the Republican Senate and House, this is really the time where they're going to probably get the most favorable audience for some sort of set of rules, whether it's regulating NIL, whether it is an antitrust exemption, which they clearly want, whether it's a declaration that college athletes are not employees. This is their moment. And if they can't get something now, I don't see any real chance for them getting it anywhere in the foreseeable future. So, look, I mean, we know that there will be press conferences when bills are introduced, and members of Congress get a lot of media attention when they talk about college sports. But at the end of the day, we have seen so little traction with these bills that I'm skeptical. But I do think if the NCAA is going to get something moved forward, really now is their moment, and they should pounce on it.
Great stuff. Michael McCann, always must listen. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate your time and expertise. We will take a very short break here. Plenty of time remaining for you to get in. We're coming right back.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Welcome back. Great to have all of you with us. Let's continue with more phone calls. And how about Fireball up next? Good afternoon.
Hey, Paul, I'm going to put a little kick to this, and I know you can't stand it. How you doing today?
Never been better than since you asked me that.
Now ask me how I'm doing.
How are you doing?
Oh, it ain't nothing to it, just like my paycheck.
That's good. We got a real comedian
Paul,
here.
I want to give. First of all, I want to give a shout out to a cousin of mine. He's 90 years old. Had a lot to do with sports around Mobile, Alabama, down here, and
Okay.
another friend, Larry Coleman, that fell and broke his hip, and he's recuperating. But what I wanted to talk to you about, why can't they an athlete that gets NIL money from a school, all right, say they get $1 million, $2 million, whatever, they have to sign a contract that they can't be wooed by another college. Just like the Downs boy from Alabama, that things didn't go right when Saban retired.
Right.
And first thing you know, Ohio State wooed him and probably gave him another bunch of money to come to that school.
Yeah, they sure
What
did.
do you think about that?
Well, you've raised a really good question, and I think that's why they're trying so hard, per the most recent guest we had, to get this legislation, because right now there really isn't anything in the agreements that keep you there. They're essentially one-year deals.
Right. Well, that's a lot of money for one year.
Yeah, it really
But
is,
anyway.
and I think it's the biggest problem that coaches complain about is they have to re-recruit the same players every single year. Thank you for the call. Let's go to the heavyweight champion of the world right now, Brad in Macon, Georgia. Brad, good afternoon.
Good to see you again. And hey, man, we're going to have to get your godson to come on here, Mr. Talty or Griff or Big Bad Bratton, to start countering some of these people coming on. Just want this participation speeches.
Yeah. So you want Talty or Brad? Which one you want?
I like all three of them. I have a little problem with Talty, but that's all right.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about you and John Talty right now. There seems to be some brewing blood here.
There's a little bit of brewing blood, Paul. I mean, we're not on the same page, but he is an SEC type guy, so I can tolerate him. But I do like.
By the way,
Bratton.
Talty went to the university. He went to a Big Ten school.
See, Paul, I knew there was a reason I didn't like that guy.
He went to the University of Maryland. By the way, I had to think for a second that they were actually in the Big Ten, but they are.
They are. I knew there was a reason I didn't like him. I knew it was, but hey, man, you're a man of the people, correct?
I've always have been.
I'm a person of the people.
Yeah.
Can I say something to Mr. Hale?
I wish you would.
Mr. Hale, let's go ahead and cut it to what it is. You said something that people pay a lot of money to go to universities and they expect big games. Well, let me tell you, as a man who's paid for 2 degrees at 2 universities and a bunch of private school to go with it, that don't make you deserve. If you want to be in big games, win some big games and you'll be there. Until then, you can keep your participation speeches to yourself. It ain't going to work around here because we like good football. We don't care about your wants. Am I speaking the truth, Paul?
Brother, you are laying it down.
I want to lay some wood, man, because, I'm tired of hearing participation speeches. And, when you start talking about national championships and the SEC and the Big Ten, the ACC's had a couple teams that get in there to win them, Florida State and Clemson. But, SEC, 5 teams in the last 25 years. And the Big Ten, they've had a couple. But most of the time, it's going to come down to the 2 schools. People want to see the best ball. So let them have the most spots or, give them the best spots because they're going to earn it every single time.
Brad, by the way, I was on a radio station in Atlanta today, and guess what came up? Mike Bobo, your guy, Bobo.
Bobo the bozo, man.
By the way, I echoed some of your comments. I'll let people find the comments for themselves, but you will like what I said.
Oh, I can't wait to get my ears on that to see what you said because Bobo, for the most part, in a regular game, he's okay. But if you put him in a big-time game, championship game, he's like a cat on a porch and right up under a bunch of rocking chairs, Paul. He locks up and he's nervous. He just can't pull the trigger, and he gets us in stuff we don't need to get in, and he blows it.
You have been your comments have been confirmed. Hey, thank you very, very much. Let's continue here.
Paul.
You bet, buddy. Good to see you. Let's check out Justin, who is up next in Alabama. Hello, Justin.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
Justin, we're doing great.
That's good. I was going to say is that Auburn might win in basketball, but Alabama owns Auburn in football. Roll Tide, bye.
Ooh, that was not a long call. Terry is in Arkansas. Hello, Terry.
Hey, man, you got the SEC Sports Diva on the line, and I don't know what that guy thinks. He's a heavyweight, but I'm going to bring a wood and lay it down on everybody. We're going to mud stomp Auburn and take that number one, knock them off that number one perch, just like we did 3 years ago up in the bud. So I'd like to hear all from other War Eagle fans on that, and we're going to do Alabama a favor, as bad as I hate to do Alabama a favor. We're going to help them out a little bit because we got to win it to get in it, and we're going to get on a roll now.
Well, Terry, do you think that can happen?
Well, I'm not going to call in if I didn't think it could happen, Paul. I mean, I'm not going to say nothing
negative about my team. You don't sound like you're bristling or beaming with confidence, though.
Well, I feel pretty good about this team. They just got to get over the hump, They played Alabama pretty good. I've been watching them, been listening on the radio.
Terry, thanks for the call. We're up against the break.
Thank you for listening to the Best of the Paul Finebaum Show podcast. Watch the Paul Finebaum Show weekdays from 3 to 7 Eastern on the SEC Network. Plus, you can listen and watch on the ESPN app.